At our emotional support pile of books.
Exactly. All right, welcome back to the podcast, which now has a new name, Life on Books. It's been a while. We recorded an excellent episode with Krista Graham, and there was a technical error where basically what I found out was the memory card I was using to record in this new unit was not capable, didn't meet the minimum specs for the settings that I used, and basically the file was corrupted.
It's lost in the ether.
Yeah, we had the audio from the cameras, but that's pretty much useless trash. So,
like I said, when that happened, I think having a great episode that we have to toss from technical difficulties makes us a real podcast now.
Absolutely. So, we've never been more legit than we are right now.
It's good to be back.
Good to be back. So today's episode is all about lists, and this was Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead's idea. So we're talking about our top 5 favorite books of all time, the top 5 books we're looking forward to reading the most, top 5 most overrated books, underrated books. So this is the lists episode, and hopefully people will get some maybe inspiration of things to read after they hear some of these lists, maybe avoid a couple purchases they might have made if they had something on their list to buy. And then, if you've read any of these, hopefully you can share in our joy of them. So I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you right away.
Oh, boy.
So I thought it would be fun for the favorite books portion.
Okay.
We'll go back and forth,
Yep.
but we get to guess which books are on each other's lists.
Okay.
And I think this might be a little bit easier for me than for you.
Does it have anything to do with the fact that all of mine are directly behind us?
To be honest, I haven't taken that close of a look at it, so I won't cheat.
Okay.
But how does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're going to start with our top 5 favorite books of all time. We'll go back and forth one book at a time, and mine are not ranked necessarily in a particular
mine
order
aren't either.
And maybe just give a quick breakdown of why you enjoyed the book so much, and maybe who would enjoy it if they have not read it.
Yeah.
So I just know this for a fact. Your favorite book is Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon.
Yeah, it's up there. It's like you said. We said it's not ranked. I would say it's definitely top 3. Where it ranks in those top 3 depends on the weather, how I'm feeling that day.
Yep.
There's really no rhyme or reason. But I think after having recently reread it, it's definitely probably number 1 right now.
So what were your initial thoughts when you began reading it, and then after reading it, what put it in the top 5 for you?
My initial thought was, what the hell is this? I think, we covered a lot of that when we talked about books like Gravity's Rainbow way back when. I think what really drew me into it was, the density of it, the complexity, a lot of the ideas that are contained within. It's you're kind of working your way through it now. It's a very funny book. There's lots of humor within. It's the high magic of low puns. It's very lowbrow to kind of commentate on higher brow topics, more serious societal issues and things like that. And just, I don't know how to put it specifically. It just kind of has this aura about it that really drew me in. That kind of paranoia and the connectedness of everything is plays a big role in our major themes within the book. And I remember after finishing it the first time, those kind of feelings carried over. Like I was feeling those things just in like my day-to-day life, like noticing random things that how are these connected with, and just stuff like that kind of started to stick out to me. And I think just that feeling that I had while reading the book, that I started to feel at the grocery store, at work, just random things. It stuck out, and it had this really special feeling to me. And, like I think I had said when we first spoke and had talked about it a little bit more at length, trying to research and understand more about not only Gravity's Rainbow, but Thomas Pynchon in general has kind of led me down this rabbit hole of literature and has led me to some of my other favorite books, favorite authors, and just types of books in general. So I think that one's going to be on my Mount Rushmore for quite a while. I don't see that coming down anytime soon.
Yeah, I think, in full disclosure, I've not yet completed Gravity's Rainbow. I'm about 260 pages in or so. And what I found about it is that as a piece of writing, I don't necessarily enjoy it so much, but I really love it as a body of work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And Andy and I just came back from a local used bookstore called the Henniker Book Farm, and there was a book there that I took a photo of. Let me see if I can find it. It's called Liar's Tale, A History of Falsehood, and it's all about some of the beliefs that we've held in this country that on the surface people don't even question because they just seem like common sense or are accepted as absolute truths but aren't.
Right.
And that book to me seemed like the nonfiction, very academic version of Gravity's Rainbow, which is like he's essentially attacking that philosophy, but doing it in a narrative fiction or loose narrative fiction. It is the type of book that I get enjoyment out of reading it because it does make you laugh. There's so many very deep and philosophical and sociological issues that are being questioned in the book, but then he dumps something in there like something I just sent to you the other day was like, oh, they had used this chemical to kill like oodles and noodles of people, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny in that way. And it's also extremely impressive how much the guy knew, because you have to understand the politics and all the interconnectalities of all these different issues to be able to even write a book like that.
Yeah.
So it is a very like personally fulfilling book when you read it. I just don't have the like mental capacity to sit down and read it every day.
It's
for
a
an
tough
hour
one
at a
to
time.
like commit to on a regular, you have to be awake. You have to, have, be focused, have good attention, have some energy,
Yeah.
I think it's funny when we had the pipe dream of doing the group read, and I think you had suggested like 8 weeks. And
Yeah.
it's not going to happen, man.
Yeah.
It's not.
And what happened with that was a lot of people were interested in the book because it does appear on lists of greatest works of the 20th century or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of on their radar without really knowing anything about it. And so people are like, oh, yeah, I'll join the group read. And then we had like 40 or 50 people reach out. And then like the first meeting, there was like 10. And then the second meeting, there was like 5. And then there basically wasn't a third meeting,
Yeah.
So it's for me something I'm going to for sure finish, but I just can't do it every day. So I'm basically reading like one chapter a week, more or less.
Yeah. That's kind of how I was when I first started it. I, like you just said, I saw about it on some like best books list or whatever. And I was like, this sounds good. And I got it for Christmas and I was like starting to read it. And I was, like I said earlier, I was like, what the hell is going on? What is this? And I think I just felt so curious about it that I struggled my way through it, but I was just like, I want to know what this is about, what this is. And I just kind of powered through. So
yeah, and it goes back to what you want to get out of your reading. For example, I read The Pale Blue Eye, which they made into a Christian Bale Netflix movie this year by Louis Bayard. And it's kind of like a historical fiction, whodunit type of thing. Great book, well written. I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun reading it, but that would never like appear on my list of like, this is one of the best books ever. Even though while I'm reading it, I'm maybe enjoying it more than like reading Gravity's Rainbow. I still don't like appreciate it nearly as much. Or get like that long-term satisfaction of pushing through. And we talked about this way back in our first episode about why read hard books, but after reading something like Gravity's Rainbow, you go to something much simpler and then you feel like, oh, this is going to be better because it's easier, and then you're kind of like, it's like too easy almost.
There was one of the other books that I have on my list that we'll talk about later. After I finished it, like I want to say for a month, maybe two after, like just nothing I read resonated with me. I was, and I read some, what I think were some good good books in that time frame after. And it was just like dud. Like I just wasn't into any of it. So
I think it's kind of like working out. If you're in the gym doing a really hard, challenging workout and you're like, this sucks. I'm sweaty. I'm hot. My muscles are burning. My lungs are burning. I can't wait for this to be over. And then after you do it, you feel really good. And then like maybe next time when you go in, you're like not pushing yourself as much. You're just like, I can't like get into it. Like it's just not challenging enough. So, all right. So let's hear your guess for one of my top 5 favorite books.
I'm
Come on. There's one that I talk about all the time that you must know.
The title escapes me, but it's the Primo Levi.
Yes.
Okay.
If This Is a Man.
Yep.
By Primo Levi. It's a nonfiction. For those that don't know, it's a Holocaust memoir. He was an Italian Jew that was interned at Auschwitz and survived, obviously. And then actually later took his own life many years later, probably out of PTSD, depression, guilt. I think that there's a lot of, obviously, there's a ton of Holocaust memoirs. Diary of Anne Frank, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, Night by Elie Wiesel, and they're all great in their own way, but I just think that Primo Levi was the best writer out of all of them. I think that he understood the human condition better than maybe, or was able to articulate it a little bit better than anyone else. And like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is good in the sense that he talks about how in that situation you have no autonomy, you have no control except for how you react to things. That's the only thing they really can't take from you. And so it wants to have this like positive spin on it, which is totally understandable. And there's a lesson to be learned there. But I think what I love about Primo Levi is that he was just like, nope, like this just sucked. Like everything about this sucked. He wasn't afraid to like stare the horrors of it in the face. And so, I think it's just, for whatever reason, it's just one of those books that I've read only once and I think about it all the time. It sticks with me. I bust it open all the time and just like read random excerpts out of it because it's just really good writing. And I think, I just think it's the best one from that period.
All right. I will have to get to my copy sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I think it's a fairly easy read. The writing is good, but it's not overly complicated in my opinion.
As easy as a Holocaust memoir could be.
Yes, the writing. Obviously, the subject matter is extremely intense. So your T-shirt's giving away another one of your top picks here, which is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Would you rank that above, below, or on the same level as Gravity's Rainbow?
I think as a body of work, I would rank it below Gravity's Rainbow. I think David Foster Wallace during his life was kind of coy about the influence Pynchon had on him. But I think at the end of the day, without Gravity's Rainbow, Infinite Jest would not exist.
Yeah, I thought that the writing in Infinite Jest was less good after picking up Gravity's Rainbow.
I still think the writing in Infinite Jest is fantastic, but I think it's one of those things where like it's not even the stylistic similarity, it's just the type of book where it was this big, expansive, encyclopedic, like that had the courage to say so much and go after so many ideas. That type of a book like Infinite Jest would not exist without something like Gravity's Rainbow, where the author is like, okay, someone wrote this book, I can write this book.
Yeah. I think Infinite Jest is easier to read.
I would agree. I think there's
more of a narrative. Yeah.
I think personal enjoyment from start to finish, I would rank Infinite Jest a little bit higher. It is a difficult book. You have to pay attention. You have to, you can't just kind of skim the pages. You have to be absorbed in the work. But I think, like you said, there's more of a narrative. There's a little bit more of a plot to follow along. I think Wallace's characters are a little bit more fleshed out. There's more depth and humanity within the characters. And I just, personally, I think, like I said, enjoyed it a little bit more.
It's a more recent and maybe relevant subject matter, addiction, more or less, to simplify it. A lot of people can't necessarily...
Endless entertainment. Like, yeah.
Obviously, Gravity's Rainbow is about war and violence, and which is,
systems of control
and government agencies and corruption and stuff. So
fun, light subjects like that.
All right. You don't want to take any other guesses?
Give me a hint.
I feel like there's one that's a layup. Similar topic to Gravity's Rainbow.
Oh, it's Catch-22.
Catch-22.
I don't know how I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's probably, if I had to pick like my absolute favorite book, it's probably that one. For those who haven't read it, it's about a World War II pilot fighting in the European theater, and basically really puts in the spotlight the absurdity of war.
Yeah.
So when you find out what Catch-22 really is, it's quite brilliant. And we know it as a phrase now. It's pretty common. But basically, they keep upping the amount of missions that these pilots have to fly. And so he's looking for a way to get out of it because he keeps hitting the standard, and then they up it, and then he has to fly more missions. And so the Catch-22 is that if you're crazy, you can't go fly because they don't want a crazy pilot flying a plane. But if you know that you're crazy, then you're not crazy. So you can't go say, I can't fly because I'm crazy. So that's the Catch-22. And it's just a wonderfully written book, in my opinion. I think the humor is amazing. It gets criticized a lot because there's a lot of repetitive dialogue that I think gets lost on people. And it's, in my opinion, the repetition is really poking fun at the military.
Agreed.
Which is like, the military has a lot of systems in place, and some of them make sense because it's how you stay alive, or, things, that's the way the machine works. But some of it's just like makes no sense at all. So there's a lot of really ridiculous characters. The whole thing is very tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
It hit me at the right time. I just really loved it. And yeah,
I read about, I think, the first 100 pages or so last summer, and I was enjoying it. I liked it. I was wanted to keep reading it. I had something else that had been delivered at the time, and it was delivered sooner than I was expecting it, and I was really excited about that one, and I jumped right in, and it just kind of Catch-22 just fell by the wayside, and I have not made time for it again, but it's definitely something that I would like to get back to at some point.
Yeah, I think being a mood reader, I totally get that. There's books that are on my to-read list that I have been like, ooh, I do want to eventually get to it.
Yeah.
But I'm just like not in the mood. And I find actually that I can't do two books back to back that are very similar in theme or style. I just kind of get a little burnt out.
Yeah, I hear that.
So, for example, I just finished the new Martin Luther King Jr. biography, and I was like, man, I want to like read more about Malcolm X now,
Yeah.
And I went and picked up the Malcolm X biography, and I was just like, this is like just such heavy stuff. I was like, I just need to pump the brakes for a minute and read something that's like way out of left field. And now I'm reading a book about kind of like a modern version of Catch-22, but it's about a Vietnamese spy in Vietnam. So,
see, I have like the same idea. Like, I'll read a book about, whatever subject or theme or something, and then in my head I'll be like, that was really good. I want to read something more about this or something similar or whatever, and I'll go to that next book, and I'll get about halfway through, and I'm like, I shouldn't have done this. I should have waited a little bit,
Yeah, you get overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
And especially if it's like a really heavy topic. It's just, like I need a little bit of a mental break from feeling depressed about how poorly this country treated black people. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
All right. This is gonna get a little harder. Actually,
it's still gonna be easy for you. I mean, it's not.
There's a book that I just bought. Oh, right here, Warlock by Oakley Hall. Is that on your top 5?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
Warlock.
So actually, I bought this book on a blind recommendation from Andy. So what is this even about? I know nothing about it.
So it's kind of a Western. I'm gonna.
Yeah, you can take it from the pile.
Yeah. So it's set during the 1880s, kind of towards the end of the 19th century. In a, I don't remember if it's named. I think it's New Mexico-ish. It's near the border. It's in like a mining town that doesn't. I don't think they actually have like official township. And there's a gang of bandits, rustlers, whatever you want to call them, that kind of keep terrorizing the town. And the townspeople hire a marshal to kind of oversee and protect them and serve justice as needed. And so you have that going on there. And then kind of another, I want to say minor, but secondary storyline that's going on is the miners themselves are kind of unionizing against the guy that owns the mining company.
And nobody likes that.
So you have those kind of two clashes building up, kind of coming to a head of steam throughout the novel.
Cool.
So, but it's really good. I picked it up as a blind recommendation from Thomas Pynchon.
Oh, sick.
He didn't write me personally, unfortunately, but in the introduction, so he has a collection of short stories that he wrote like pre any of his novels.
Pynchon, you're talking?
Yes.
Yeah.
That he published between Gravity's Rainbow and Vineland. And he wrote the introduction for it, which is like the only book that he's written any sort of blurb, introduction, anything about. It's the closest to any sort of autobiographical writing.
Sure.
And he actually mentions this. Actually, I just remembered that's not where he mentions this at all.
What year was this published?
This was published in. It was while he was in college. 1958.
Oh wow, that's actually older than I thought it was for some reason.
1958. I'm kidding. I found out about this book in the introduction that Pynchon wrote to "Been Down So Long It Looks Like Up to Me" by
who's that by?
Richard Farina.
Okay,
they were classmates at Cornell, good
gotcha.
friends, and they were big fans of this book while they were at school there.
First of all, doesn't that like blow your mind when like two very talented people know each other?
Yes.
In their personal life, just like they went to school together.
Yeah.
Something that always comes to mind for me for that is from Rage Against the Machine. Tom Morello was roommates with either Maynard James Keenan, the singer of Tool, or maybe it was Adam Jones, the guitar player. But they went to Harvard together, and it's just like, what the like.
Yeah.
And now you're both, pioneering bands of the '90s, and it's like, what? How do you?
You're right. Yeah, Gravity's Rainbow is actually dedicated to Farina.
Oh, cool.
He, I forget when his novel, when Been Down So Long Up to Me came out, but Farina died within a week of it being published.
No way.
Yeah, he was in a motorcycle accident.
Ooh, they'll get you every time.
Yeah.
Wear your helmets, kids. So does Warlock read like Pynchon stylistically?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It has some trickier moments where you kind of have to go back and reread a few.
Yeah.
But I think density-wise, it's a little bit easier to read.
And when I say stylistically like Pynchon, that's almost not even a statement you can make because like the first Pynchon I read was Inherent Vice.
Yeah.
And then you read Gravity's Rainbow. You're like, is this even the same person writing this book?
Yeah. You can tell. So one of the themes that I think kind of embodies all of Pynchon's work to some extent or another is the subjectivity of history. Who says what happened versus what actually happened.
Sure. That and 1 million characters.
That too.
This is calling card.
And that is kind of a big theme within Warlock. The kind of morality of the people that are typically deemed heroes by historical figures. And I don't think it's going to spoil anything, but this marshal that gets hired he kind of has a rough past and was a gunslinger at one point, and he's kind of this morally gray character. There are some interactions that you kind of get one telling or one side of the story from certain characters. Maybe a different perspective comes up later in the book. It's you kind of have to pick which one you think actually happened, what really happened. It's not always on the surface. It's kind of clear, like, okay, these guys are the good guys, these guys are the bad guys. But as you get more in depth with it, it gets a little bit more gray.
Yeah.
So, and I think that is a big thing that carries over into Pynchon's work.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this one.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to do it before the end of 2023. So
You should.
all right. I assume you're out of guesses at
I'm
this
out.
point.
Yeah.
So I would say, and I actually struggled to pick a top 5 just because I've read a lot of books that I've enjoyed. And how do you really decide?
I think I actually had like a top 7.
Yeah. But I put East of Eden by Steinbeck on there.
I should have guessed that.
Yeah.
How did I not guess Steinbeck?
It's interesting because with the other books on my list, I can tell you very specific details about them, like remember very distinctly the characters, the plot lines, even maybe quote some things. But that's not the case with East of Eden. Like, I vaguely remember it's like, okay, about these two families, and the kid's mom is a you know what, and so,
A terrible person.
yeah. I don't want to spoil it for anyone that's not read it, but so I like vaguely remember it, but I couldn't even tell you like most of the characters' names. But it's just one of those things where I catch myself like thinking about it a lot.
Yeah.
And again, I'll like bust it open, just like read random bits out of it. So there's been a few books in my life that I actually did really enjoy it while I was reading it. So I don't want to get the wrong impression, but there are some books that I've read in my life where I read them, I was like, oh, okay. But then like later I was like, I look back on them more fondly than when I was actually reading them.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the best kind of book, right? Like, because it's not just necessarily about the pure enjoyment in the moment, but it's obviously like fundamentally changing your emotional capacity or how you think about the world or whatever. So
Yeah. I don't know if I would rank that as high as you would, but I remember I've read it twice now.
Yeah.
I first read it going into my senior year of high school as a summer reading assignment. And, when I was in school, I wasn't one of those kids that was like, I don't want to read this stupid book. I'm going to, fake my way through it. I would read whatever was assigned for the most part until senioritis hit. But, I read pretty much everything that was assigned to me. And I don't think there were that many where I was just like actively dreading it or I was like, this is such a drag. I don't want to read this. But I remember East of Eden being the first assigned book where I was just like, this is good. Like I was actually enjoying it, not just reading it for for the assignment.
And it's a long book and it doesn't feel long. I think that's always a good sign. Because I think it's 600 pages or so,
something like that,
550 or 600. Yeah. And it's like you're reading it and you're not like, oh my God, get on with it. You're just kind of like there with the characters. And I think it's a great book.
I would agree.
I think I'm out of guesses from here.
Okay. You have a lot of hints at your hand if you just look to your left. You've got some choices.
So,
if you use some context, I think you'll be able to figure it out.
You have a few different piles. So, let's see. It must be the one with Infinite Jest and Gravity's Rainbow in it.
And Warlock.
Warlock.
Yeah.
Naked Singularity.
Yes.
Which, ironically, looks very similar to this other book here.
I know. They look very similar.
But they're not by the same person?
No.
Oh, interesting.
No. We'll start with The Naked Singularity. That one is by Sergio de la Pava, who...
Where's Sergio from? Let's look it up.
I want to say he's Colombian.
Sounds like a Colombian name.
I don't know if he was born in Colombia.
Well, according to the internet, he is American, my friend.
Okay.
He's from New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah, that's less exciting. I'm just kidding. Yes, he is of Colombian descent.
Okay.
His family moved to Jersey from Columbia just before he was born, apparently.
Okay. So De La Pava was / maybe still is, I'm not totally sure. But at least this book was inspired by his time working as a public defender in Manhattan. And the main character, protagonist, Casey.
Oh, hold on. He has passed. He's no longer alive. Wait. Nope. He's alive. We're good. We're good.
False alarm. A roller coaster of emotions. Wow.
Yeah, my bad.
Okay. Anyway, the protagonist is loosely based off of his experience. The protagonist is a public defender in Manhattan who, throughout the events of the book, is slowly losing his sense of faith in the justice system, and then also reality in general, and things just kind of start to unravel around him. But I think like a lot of the books that, with the exception of maybe Warlock, that are on my list, at least the 5 I have today, it's a very funny book. The dialogue in it is outstanding. I think if you are a reader who really enjoys dialogue-driven books or just good dialogue in general, I think you should check that out. It has some of the best dialogue I've encountered. It's funny. It's moving. It's touches on, like we've said, the human condition, which is, I think it's kind of hard not to do when you are a defender losing your sense of public defender, losing your sense of faith in the system that you are, employed by.
Yeah.
And just, kind of seeing the way that it treats some of the people that you're defending. There's a couple defendants of his that, without spoiling anything, their outcomes were pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Very sad, but it's a great book.
Definitely have to check that out. It looks like a long, but not crazy long.
I want to say it's
400 or so.
No, it's longer than that. I think it might be pushing 700.
Oh, wow.
Getting close to it.
I guess it's kind of a tall book. So.
Yeah, but it I don't want to say it reads quick, but it doesn't like drag on.
Right. Yeah. So I struggled with numbers 4 and 5 on my list, but I did pick Shadow Divers by Robert Kurson. Okay. It's a nonfiction I've talked about before. It's about these guys who are deep sea treasure hunters, more or less. They deep dive for buried treasure or sunken ships that have yet to be discovered. And there's a rumor that there's an German U-boat that had sunk off the coast of Jersey. And basically, it's historically significant because pretty much most of the other German U-boats during the war had been accounted for by the good guys after the war. But there's a couple that we're not really sure what happened to, and so obviously, if they find this, very historically impactful, but also where it supposedly is like much closer to like American shores than people really thought the Germans were getting. And so it's kind of an unsettling feeling that, they had ships or, U-boats really close to American shores. Because when we think of World War II, we really think of it like other than, when the Japanese attacked, but
Pearl Harbor.
Thank you. There was, thank you. We think of it as like a faraway place. And also with Pearl Harbor, I hate to say it, but like a lot of Americans don't think like Hawaii, America, you know what I mean? At
least at the time.
Well, I mean, maybe even now with the wildfires. So that's a you problem. So anyway, it's of interest to me because I'm a World War II guy that likes that kind of stuff. And also it's just really intense. What a crazy thing. The level of diving they're doing, in my opinion, is on the same level of base jumping or any other extremely risky, high skill activity. And I mean, just the thought of drowning is terrifying.
That sounds awful.
Extra layer of intensity to the book. It's a, you know, maybe not on the same level of its cultural importance as some of the other books that we've talked about, or the writing. You know, the writing is very good, but you're not going to compare like a random nonfiction to a Steinbeck or something.
Yeah.
But it's just a book that I loved when I read it. I think about it all the time. I recommend it to people all the time, so it made my list.
Nice.
And so, what's the last Twilight Zone themed?
That is
book
a Bended Circuity by Robert
right.
S. Stickley.
Should have known that one.
Which I adore. It was published by Corona Samizdat, which is a really cool independent press. They're based out of Slovenia.
Right, but he is an American author.
Yes,
correct?
yes,
Yeah.
he lives in Virginia.
Cool.
So, it's a very interesting book. So it takes place in the late 1960s, and it's set primarily in Charleston, South Carolina, and it kind of starts off with these, you know, stuffy, low country, denizen, rich, snooty type of people, you know, who grew up on old plantations and things like that. They're kind of wild, partying and things like that. And towards the beginning of the book, there is a group of more or less pranksters, and they come in and they basically vandalize Charleston. And these group of denizens kind of take it as an act of northern aggression. And one of them, who is
Classic tale.
classic, one of them, the character's name is Bradley Pinkset. He's kind of I guess you could call him more of the anti-hero. He's not, feels sort of wrong to call him the protagonist.
Sure.
But he kind of tries to start an army and spur the South to rise again.
South's gonna rise again.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, and it just kind of follows their tales. There's a Russian character who comes in, who's a Soviet spy. Yeah, is a Soviet spy. He kind of gets involved in his own ways, trying to kind of pull some strings and things like that. But it's, again, like pretty much everything else on my list, a very funny book. It kind of has that Pinchonian slapstick and strangeness to it, as well as a lot of phallic humor that
Andy's personal favorite.
It's a very moving book. It's very well written. The writing is fantastic. The vocabulary in it. I mean, there were, I don't know about you. Do you ever, like, if you're reading, if you come across a word you don't know, do you stop and write it down, or do you look it up in the moment?
I do look it up in the moment. What I do is I use the dictionary app, the dictionary.com app.
Yep.
And it has the ability to star words.
Okay.
So you can save them as a favorite. So I just do that. I look up the word in the moment, save it as a favorite, and then I kind of go back later and kind of revisit what I didn't know.
Yeah, I would do that from time to time. I actually had to stop with this book because I was like stopping so frequently, writing down so frequently. It was just like interrupting, not in a bad way. I was just like, I was just so into the book. I was like, I don't want to stop every time I don't know a word.
Yeah.
But it's very dense. One of the things that I like about it, so it's kind of a pretty slow read, which normally I don't like. But there'd be some times where, like, if you grab it and open it up, you'll see there's a lot of text packed onto a page. But one of the things, sometimes I would sit down for like an hour, and I might get 10, 15 pages in.
Yeah.
Which I don't really like. A lot of times I don't necessarily try to be a fast reader, but like if I'm reading for an hour, I'd like to try to get a sizable.
Yeah, 30, 40 maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think is really well done, I think the text itself almost has like that kind of southern drawl where it just kind of goes slowly, and it has that pace where you might be talking to an old farmer from South Carolina who just kind of is in no rush, and he's going to slowly.
Oh, that drives me insane.
And talking to a person like that, it drives me nuts. But like something about the way it is in the book, I love it. So
interesting.
I think if you like any of the books, probably we'll talk about today, particularly ones I'll talk about. I know sometimes you and I have different tastes, but I think you should check it out. I think while you're checking it out, you should see some of the other books that Corona Samizdat offers, because they're really interesting, sometimes weird and obscure books that you probably won't find at your local bookstore. So
that's what I'm all about, man. Is I like finding kind of unique stuff, odd stuff, which has its downsides if you're trying to make content on the internet related to books, because a lot of times people are just like, I don't know what it is, I don't care. So,
but one of the things I think is really cool about them, and I'm sure this is true to a lot of other smaller presses or independent authors, things like that. I've been able to find most of the authors from books I've read published by them online, and interact with them. I've had a few conversations with Stickley himself. He's a very cool guy. A few of the other books one of the other books I have on my stack today, I've talked to the author as well, so it's cool.
Yeah,
it's one of the things we had talked about in our social media episode. It's just it's cool to foster that community and be able to interact with authors that you've read.
For sure, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of authors that I've read that I would love to put on the podcast. What I found with people who are very creative, sometimes they're a little bit guarded.
Yeah.
I recall reaching out to a famous photographer that I wanted to make like a short documentary on. He just straight up said, like, I don't even do interviews. I was like, okay. I mean, he's a college professor, so there is some access to him, but
right.
I was like, all right, man, like, I'm literally just trying to promote your work for free, but he's like, don't care. It's just not what I do.
Yeah.
Respect. Totally understand. So I struggled with my last book, but I picked something that was a blast from my past, which is After the First Death by Robert Cormier.
Okay.
For those not familiar with Robert Cormier, he was a fairly prolific kind of young adult author. I don't know that was really like a label that the book industry used back when he was writing most of his books. He's probably most famous for The Chocolate War, which got turned into a movie and was a very popular book, and I Am the Cheese, which often gets compared to Catcher in the Rye. Okay. In my opinion, a much better book than Catcher in the Rye, but similar kind of
I Am the Cheese
vibe. So After the First Death, I've read it twice, both as a young person, maybe the first time as like a middle schooler and the second time in high school. And I do plan on rereading it as an adult. But basically it's about a school bus full of kids, high school kids that get held hostage by some terrorists and the negotiation process. So it's just really intense, heavy book for a young person to read, and that was kind of Robert Cormier's style. He wasn't afraid to tackle like really serious issues.
Interesting.
If you're not familiar with The Chocolate War, that was about basically when schools do like programs to like fundraise. So they had like a chocolate sale, and it was like a competition who can sell the most, and blah blah blah. And this kid like getting bullied basically. And the kid like gets his ass kicked like multiple times in the book, and then after the first death, like people die in the book, and so it's like heavy stuff for young adults, but well written. And I think that book probably more than anything really matured me as a person, because I was just like, what's a terrorist? You know what I mean? And so you start to like open your eyes to the realities of the world, especially when I grew up in a pretty normal 2-parent household, white people living in the North, middle class. Yeah. My family had some ups and downs, but in general, like, we didn't want for much. So it was like a real big eye opener to like, oh, the world is like this big, scary, complicated place. And so I just think that was a big impact on me as a person and a reader.
All right.
So
I don't know what it says about me, but when you when you first started to describe The Chocolate War, the first thing that kind of popped in my head was like, this is going to turn out to be like a ridiculous, absurd spoof satire of like disaster capitalism. Just these like
maybe it is
middle school kids.
I'd actually go back and read it.
Battling over chocolate sales. And you're like, oh, this kid was bullied. People died. It's like, oh, okay.
No, it was an incredibly popular book when it came out, which I think was like the 80s, and they made it into a film, a feature film, and there was a sequel to the book. Yeah, and I Am the Cheese is like I said, similar to Catcher in the Rye. It's about a very mentally ill kid, and so yeah, it's like some heavy topics that I think. I don't think there's anything wrong with reading YA as an adult. There's some good stories there. Maybe the genre as a whole now is a little bit more it's written with a little bit more kid gloves on, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I shouldn't say that because I'm not out here reading YA all the time. But that's just my perception. Maybe that's very like boomerish of me. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of want to do another group read with After the First Death. Because I want to read it through the lens of like an adult.
Yeah.
And also just, I think it'd be fun to like get some random people that, we follow on social media and stuff to like jump in and just see what people think. Maybe the book sucks. I don't know. I guess it could suck. So if you're enjoying this discussion, please check back for part 2 coming up soon.